So we have many techniques to try to cultivate love and compassion. And we do this for many different reasons. We discussed this in the weekend retreat that we just had. We're discussing this in the Newport class on Tuesdays. And fundamentally, our goal is to develop this love and compassion for each and every sentient being. And depending on what type of group we're thinking about, there might be different ways to do this. For strangers, we might really think about all the ways that we benefit directly in this life from all that strangers do for us. For a group of people that we have some animosity towards, we might think about our similarity to them. And we can in fact do this for every sentient being, that we're all similar in that we want happiness and we want to avoid suffering. And we can think of this as really knowing it's said as, something very intimate about them. Like the most important thing about any being I interact with is that they want happiness and to avoid suffering. It can also help, especially maybe with groups of people that we think that we're quite different from, to get to know them a little bit and to see that they're not just a stereotype, but that we have shared values, there's logic and reason for what they believe and do, even if it's very different from what we believe and do. We also work to decrease, not develop, our self-centered thought, right? Instead of having everything be from my perspective, like, oh, I dislike that person because of what they did to me, I can think of, wow, that person has friends, that person has parents, maybe children, a spouse, and really see that they are deeply loved and appreciated by many other people. And we can also look at the stories we start to tell about other people, other types of beings. And one of the things that came to mind is thinking about rats. For some people, rats are disgusting and terrifying and a pest, and they're dirty and they carry diseases and they should be, poisoned. For other people, they're cute pets. They're intelligent, they're furry, they can be nice companions. And for others, they are the subject of medical experiments. And so for perhaps a scientist, it's okay, how much do they cost? How many can I buy with my grant money? What animal model do they have the genes for that I can test certain things? And for others, it's, oh, they're being tortured, we should liberate them from their scientific, captors. So even just with the rat, depending on what lens you're viewing it through, you might have aversion towards it or love and compassion. So with that in mind, I wanted to pick one specific group to try to work on building our love and compassion for them. And there's a lot of them around right now, and that's the tick. So if, in fact, anyone has a tick during this talk, please bring it up so we can make friends with it. And I have some slides, because normally we don't get a chance to really stay up close and personal and get to know ticks, and I thought that that could be helpful. So the tick that I think we mostly have are the Rocky Mountain wood ticks. And one of the things that you'll see about this is that the males and the females look a little bit different. And I found this really helpful when I first learned this, is that when I found a tick on me, I learned, oh, first I know it's a tick. Second, I know it wants happiness and to avoid suffering. And third, I know if it's male or female. Even just that helped me have a little more fondness for ticks, as now I knew something about it. And we can keep in mind that, again, to us, we know that these are zoomed in images, and we might have that, ew, ticks are icky. But imagine what these ticks look like to each other, right? That right now we know the turkeys are out there having a whole time, right? The male and female turkeys doing their prom thing. Think of what a female tick looks like to a male tick. So beautiful, those markings on her body and the fact that she's engorged with blood around the time that they're mating. The male tick has that beautiful plumage of lines, I guess, and that the female tick might be, quite infatuated by. And the larvae and nymphs, see those as mom and dad, who, did so much to give them life. So again, to us, we might go, ew, creepy, 8 legs. But for them, they really see each other as family, as the ones they want to be with. So one of the things that's interesting, so this is the Rocky Mountain wood tick. Next slide. This is the American dog tick, which also gets called the wood tick, which is confusing. And they look really similar. And it seems just in terms of distribution that we probably don't have these here, but a lot of ticks are expanding where they're typically found. So there's certainly at least some of these here. And so I'm interested as we find ticks to look at them really carefully and try to ask them, well, are you a dog tick, also known as a wood tick, or are you the Rocky Mountain wood tick? And I don't know, we might need a microscope to actually figure that out, or the ability to speak tick language. But so again, to us, they look the same, but because they're different species, a male dog tick is going to know that it's interested in a female dog tick and not in a female Rocky Mountain wood tick. So again, for us, it's like, oh, you're all the same ticks. And for them, they're quite different. So they have this, perspective and again, this nuance of how they see one another, that we're just, it isn't that our view is right. Our view is just limited in scope. Okay, so next picture. One of the things that we sometimes notice, the ticks are the one on the left, I realize you might not know, is that we'll sometimes see when it's like, when we see a tick on the table or the wall or the carpet or, we see them pretty much everywhere, is that sometimes we see them reaching up. And my thought, initially it's like, oh, it wants to grab onto me, but yes, who else though reaches up to be picked up? Toddlers. I was thinking, some dogs will do that where, they jump up on you. It's like, pick me up, I just want some love. And so similarly, when the ticks are reaching up like that, they want to be picked up. Now, of course, that's because they want food. And we can't blame them for that. We want food too right now. It's just about lunchtime. And what's interesting is that the females are the ones who will latch on and, eat for days at a time. The males just snack a little bit, but they're also crawling around on you looking for a female. So the females want food and the males want to mate. So we, again, we might pursue those goals differently or work on subduing them. But, again, just one of those basic needs. Again, the way that a dog or a cat might come up and just want to be picked up because they want that affection. Again, ticks are just looking to have their basic needs met. Okay, next slide. So then, of course, when a tick eats, it's doing that by biting and drinking blood. So one thing that's important to know is that they need blood to survive and progress through the stages from larva to nymph and then to adult. And the female needs to really drink her fill, which is quite a lot, to be able to lay eggs. So they're not doing this out of spite. They're not biting us because they want us to suffer. They're just trying to be happy, which is going to be, living or, getting to their next stage of life. And by comparison, we know, our cats also bite us. We're not ready to kill them. And they don't even have a good reason to bite us, unlike the ticks that really need to survive. So I find that interesting. And of course, we're not the only ones that ticks bite. As they go through their life cycle, depending on the species of tick, some of them will actually have like 3 different hosts over multiple years. So normally we're not being bit by the larva and the nymphs. It's normally the adults, but so smaller mammals are more likely to be bit by the younger ticks. So again, they're doing this just because it's a necessary step for them to live. And how can they be happy if they're dead? So we can have some compassion for them and have some love and see that that's why they're biting us. Next. And of course, the reason that we don't want them to bite us, in addition to, ow, it hurts a little bit and itches afterwards, is I know for me, I was so terrified of ticks until pretty much coming here because of the diseases they carry. And Lyme disease is terrible. We've known people who've had it. People can't always get it diagnosed, and it's really debilitating. Now, the ticks that we have here don't carry Lyme disease. There's certain types of ticks that actually can carry Lyme disease and others that can't. Now, our ticks do carry Rocky Mountain spotted fever and another disease that gets called rabbit fever, which I think sounds kind of cute, but not that fun. And one thing that's helpful to know is the tick has to be attached for probably at least 4 hours to you before you can get sick with Rocky Mountain spotted fever. That the bacteria in it kind of have to like reactivate once it starts drinking blood for then the infection to occur. So again, just the ticks that we first see when they first bite us, they're not going to be the ones making us sick. It's the tick that's, behind our ear or something we don't see for days that might make us sick. And this isn't their fault. Again, just as they don't bite us out of spite, they're not making us sick out of spite. Often it's that one of the first animals they feed on when they're nymphs or even larvae had this disease, so they catch it. All of the research out there about tick-borne diseases, answer questions like what factors lead people to get more or less sick, how long does it take for transmission. I didn't see any research that was assessing how do the ticks feel when they have these diseases. Do they get a rash? Do they cough? Do they have a fever? No one thinks about that. And certainly they might suffer too from carrying these diseases, but mostly they're just the vector. They're carrying it from one mammal to another. And the other thing that I thought about is, again, they kind of stumble into this, being this vector, carrying one of these diseases through causes and conditions. And it's very much the same when our afflictions arise. I don't wake up in the morning hoping to be angry, but then through causes and conditions, including the seed of anger in my mind, I end up angry, and that might result in harming someone else. Through causes and conditions that happen. Now, I have the ability, through the Buddha's teachings and my human mind, to work on my afflictions, apply antidotes, and hopefully decrease that harm. And we can have compassion for the fact that the ticks don't have any ability to find out ahead of time, is this animal I'm about to bite infected or not? They don't have any ability to, try to control the sickness or take medication themselves. They're completely at the whim of these diseases, the way that some sentient beings are at the whim of the afflictions, having no idea that there's something they could do to actually work with that and decrease their harm to others. And lastly, one of the things that I thought we might be able to use to cultivate compassion towards them is that when a mama tick lays a whole bunch of eggs, thousands upon thousands of eggs, only about 2 of them survive to become adults. That, these larvae that kind of just end up wherever the eggs were, have to find a host and grab onto it, as like infants basically, and many of them are not going to manage to do that. And then they have to find, as a nymph, again, another host. And, they're doing this through the winter, they're doing this through the summer, so extreme temperatures are going to kill them. So this poor mama tick had thousands upon thousands of eggs that turned into thousands of larvae, and maybe she only ends up with a few adult babies. So our hearts go out to the turkey mamas when we see that their brood decreases week by week, sometimes very suddenly. And so I thought that maybe similarly we could have some compassion for the tick mamas who see that their brood, well, I think they die before most of them make it very far, but that their brood isn't going to make it to adulthood, and that's a reason to be compassionate. So, last slide. I hope that this has helped change your view a little bit of ticks, that they're not inherently something scary and icky. I know here we do our best to pull them off without hurting them, and we let them go outside where maybe they won't bite another one of us. But if you have the opportunity to do so, probably you will, try to have some love and compassion in your heart and mind as you do so, recognizing that this is a little sentient being with its own happiness and suffering, and that in its next life it might get to be a turkey mama or even a human, and certainly then we would see how we want it more to have happiness, compassion, happiness, be free from suffering, and to be able to have a spiritual practice.